Hey there, I'm Kathy with the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm, and today we're going to be talking about how to make something that I learned how to make when I was living in China. To kind of bring self-reliance a little bit closer to home, I just like to use my experiences from where I've lived before and make them around the holidays or kind of whenever I get the yen for missing something that where I've been. And in this case, I used to live in a city called Jinan, and I taught English and art at a high school. And one day, one of my students actually invited me to her home, and I was able to go with some of the other teachers that I worked with, and we were able to learn how to make some steamed dumplings. And in actuality, they call them steamed dumplings or jiaozi, but in this household, they actually boiled them in water. And they were really tasty and actually rather easy to make. So I learned how to make that filling, and I learned how to make jiaozi, and I brought them that recipe home with me, and now I make it for friends and family whenever I get the chance. But I also have learned how to do this on a bit of a budget. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. To kind of have it go farther. Now, one of the things that I've done is I've gotten just over 2 pounds. This is 2.5 pounds of pork that you can see I got it on sale for $3.94. And I actually put it in my freezer because I knew I wanted to make this recipe. And so sometimes I'll go to the store and stock up on things well in advance, but so I can do this kind of when I want to, even if I don't know exactly when, so that when I do get it, all I have to do is get the fresh ingredients. So like for this, I have the meat. All I needed to do was get my Napa cabbage and my green onions, which I have here, and you can either purchase the wrappers for them, or you can make them on your own. You can make it simple dough recipes, water and flour. But for today, I'm going to use these wrappers just for ease of use. So let's get started. So now that I have my vegetables all cut up, my cabbage, I just simply kind of shred it down into smaller pieces that are bite-sized and somewhat equal in size. And for the green onions, you can see that I have both the white ends and the green. They're just going to get all combined. And so I'm just going to put them right now in my big bowl so that it's all ready to go for the next steps. Now, this will be making actually quite a fair amount of filling. And that's kind of a good thing because for me, this is something that really can feed a lot and go a long ways. Like I said before, you can actually make several different things with this filling that I'm going to show you. And sometimes that's a good thing. And so you can actually freeze some of this filling for other times. And that's what we'll be doing too today. So when I cook in bulk, I usually like to have multiple options from one source. And in this case, this is a filling that's my one source. So now we have our mixture in here. So now that we have this, our first part in here, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves a little bit. Now, this next part you can do kind of either way as you want. Today I'm going to put on some gloves just because I want to keep my hands a little bit cleaner for the time being. But when you work with pork, remember that it can cross-contaminate pretty easily, and you should always wash your hands after using it or touching the actual meat, because you don't want to contaminate other things. So you can work with the meat raw if you're going to then wash your hands right afterwards. And I've washed my hands and like to be sanitary about all this. But I'll be today wearing gloves just for ease of cleanliness. So for today, the next thing I'm going to do is take my pork, and I'm going to put on my nice gloves before I start getting into it. And it's just going to mix together. But before I start mixing it, it's not just the vegetables and the meat. So this is where having things in your food storage kind of helps you out too. So I'm going to just open up my package of meat. And again, normally when I do this, I try to do 1 pound of meat, 1 head of Napa of cabbage, and 1 bunch of green onions. That's the recipe. So 1, 1, and 1. But today I have 2.5 pounds of the pork with 1 really large head of cabbage and 2 bunches of green onions. Okay, I'm not adding quite as much cabbage, but you can add more to kind of extend it out even more. So now to our vegetable mix, just going to put in the pork. Okay, so now is where the seasonings come in. Now, these different seasonings are ones that I happen to have on hand, but I've stocked up on these kind of on purpose because I know my palate and what I want to use them for. So I'm just going to set this aside for a moment while I show you. First, I end up using this Bragg's amino acids. This is basically my soy sauce. You can use regular soy sauce if you like. That's fine. I happen to like this amino acids. It's slightly less salty, but has all the same flavor, though it does have some salt to it. And so that's why I like this. It's just my preference. But if you like regular soy sauce, that's good. If you are have celiac disease or are gluten intolerant, you remember that soy sauce can have gluten in it. And so that's something else to look into as well. Make sure you read the back of the label. Yes, it is gluten-free, okay? There are no artificial preservatives, no alcohol, not fermented, and it is gluten-free. And so that's another reason why I kind of got into the liquid aminos, was because it was gluten-free. And some soy sauces are not. And so for a comparable price and taste, I felt this was good to having the gluten-free soy sauces. So that's number one that we're going to look at. Now, something else we're going to look at is rice vinegar. Now, I'm showing you 2 colors, essentially. I use them both depending on when I can get them. This one is the seasoned rice vinegar, and this one is not. That's the basic premise. Personally, I can't taste the difference much in the two, so that's why I get them both. So I've stocked up on both colors, although rice vinegar, to me, is rice vinegar is rice vinegar. So make sure you get some rice vinegar and have that set aside. Then I'm also going to use sesame oil. This sesame oil adds something of a different flavor, and I kind of like the consistency of it. It's very subtle, but when I don't have the sesame oil, I actually can tell the difference, even though it's kind of light, if that makes any sense. So the next ingredient, and is actually, to me, rather important, is fish sauce. Now, yes, it's fish sauce, and yes, it smells bad. But this brings out an awful lot of good flavors in this particular item. Now, I am using pork like you saw before, and I use pork because it takes in a lot of good seasoning. You could change out that protein for shrimp, chicken, beef even, or if you want to go vegetarian, you can actually do all vegetables, or even tofu. The tofu will help kind of keep a little bit of bulk to it. But either way, no matter the protein source, the fish sauce actually does add some good flavor. Again, I am not certain about being vegetarian or vegan, so if fish sauce is part of those things that you should not feel you should have because of those diets, vegan and vegetarian, then certainly don't use it, or use it an appropriate substitute. But then, almost last but not least, is this handy, I sometimes call this rooster sauce just because of the rooster, but it's sriracha or hot sauce. And this adds a nice little depth to it too, a flavor with a little kind of heat. Now, I'll point out that I'm not looking for hot. I'm looking for flavor combination. And so, in my gauging of this, I'll try to give you measurements, but I go a lot by flavor and by smell. For my own personal taste, I tend to go a little heavier on the rice vinegar and on the soy sauce. And I try to go a little light on the sriracha sauce. But if you like things a little hotter, certainly add a little bit more of that. So, with that in mind, we're going to make sure these are all, yep, that's all good. So, before I start mixing things up, okay, I'm literally just going to squeeze in. Now, I'm going to point out, this is about a brand new bottle, and there will be about at least a half a cup of the soy sauce and a half a cup of the rice wine vinegar. Okay, so I really add, these are the two main flavors that I put in. So half and half of each, okay? And that's why I stock up on these really well, because I use, in this dish, I use a lot. Now, you're thinking, well, that's an awful lot of liquid, but it'll come together and give it a nice flavor. And I do let it, that's why I put these two in first, because they help the pork with some flavoring and kind of marinating a little bit. Now, the fish sauce, and this does have the label on it, or this is a brand new bottle for me, so I'm going to take a minute to open it up. Now, too, the fish sauce, I will point out, it does have the, when you get it, if you've not used it before, it does have the plastic on the outside, but then it has the inside thing that's a pull tab. And you just got to pull that out to then use it. So you don't want to take this bottom part out, you just pull the pull tab. Okay, now with this, I'd probably say 2 tablespoons. About 2 tablespoons of the fish sauce. And again, I'm going to pour it right over the pork. There. And without this, I find that, again, the flavor just isn't there. You can taste the other ingredients, but this really helps out in a really strange way. And then with the sesame oil, you'll probably use about, again, 2 to 3 tablespoons of the sesame oil. There. And then with the sriracha, again, this is to taste. So if you like a little bit more heat, certainly add more. But try to remember, this is about having equal flavors. So sometimes more of one thing can take away other flavors. So now with this one, I'm just going to do, in this case, a solid tablespoon of this. And that's probably going to do me good for now. A little bit extra. So now, this is where we get dirty. Just come on in and start squishing. Now, you can get all your aggressions out with this one. You'll find that there's an awful lot of that cabbage down there, lady. You sure this is all kind of good? Yes, it is all kind of good. And the cabbage will actually kind of break down and be get softer. Almost like when you make sauerkraut. The cabbage kind of breaks down a little bit and gets a little bit softer. So you just want to get this all mixed in together with all the seasonings. So as I'm mixing this up together, you'll kind of notice that you'll see a lot of the meat in there kind of getting moved around. And this is where I really use my sense of smell. And right now it's smelling a little more vinegary than I might like. And so I want to make sure that it has more of the other flavors in it as well. And I will try to see if you can see here down at the bottom, there's not really any extra liquid. Get that in there. So all the liquid that we put in is really kind of absorbing nicely in there. So, and I got a little tear in my other glove, so I want to make sure that I keep my hand off there. But we can add a little bit more of some of the other flavors, so to speak. So this is where I'll add in a little bit more of my spices. I'll shake up my soy sauce a little bit and add a little bit more of that. And again, you want it to smell Asian. I mean, I don't know if that's a legitimate way of putting it. But when you smell the nice blend of all the things coming together, that's when you know it's right. I'm also going to add a little bit more of the oil, the sesame oil, and this has a light smell to it, and I'm not kind of feeling that come through in the smell either. Let's see, the sesame oil, to give you the sense of the sesame oil, it smells like kind of almost like roasted nuts. If you've toasted sesame seeds before, that smell of toasted sesame seeds is kind of like what this smells like. So I'm going to add a little bit more to that. And to be honest, this sesame oil will allow it to be a little bit more, it keeps it nice and moist, as well as giving it good flavor. So now that I've added those two, I'm going to mix it up some more and give it kind of a nice go. And now I'm smelling it kind of combine a little bit more with the little extra soy sauce and a little extra sesame oil. Now the flavors are kind of coming through. So that's kind of a good thing. And again, mix it up really good. If you're going to kind of put it all together, put it all together. And with that, I'm going to set that aside for a minute. So I wanted to bring you around a little bit different vantage point to show you how I'm going to do this next part. It's actually rather easy, but it's going to be the part that what brings our jiaozi together. So you're going to want to get a nice full tablespoon of filling. Now, that's probably going to be a little too much. So you want to make sure that your filling is going to be able to fit in there without exploding. And so that might be just enough. Though I'm going to take a little bit out because I don't want it to explode too much. There. So sometimes you'll have to give it a little bit of an eyeball, but you're going to try to keep it nice and centered in the middle. And I will just do something rather simple. Put the corners together like this. Bring in the one corner and kind of seal them shut. You can kind of see how I'm just squeezing them together. And then I'll come around the other side and do the same. Kind of tuck it in. Just squeeze them together and squeeze together the top. So that's what it looks like. So now with this handy dandy little nugget, you can either freeze it, put it right in your freezer with a stash of others for a serving of these, or you can put it in oil and have a wonton, or you can put it in water and have it like I did, more of a traditional style steamed dumpling, a jiaozi, or you can actually put it in a steamer and have it steamed. So any of those options are great. So with this one little packet, you can freeze it for later, you can fry it fresh, you can boil it, or you could steam it, just with this. And you can have it as a side dish, or you can put it in a soup, like for wonton soups. Or you can have it like just as part of your main dish. So that's the benefit of doing these things. So this one item can go 3 different ways for a meal, which is awesome. So with that, you now have that option. But we can also do something similar, but make it a bit bigger with egg rolls. Now you can make this into an egg roll and add more other vegetables to it. Now I'm just going to put it in here to show you how I wrap it. So now, similar to our little wonton, our little number, we're going to again take our water, dip around the edge, make sure you have a nice healthy layer of water around the edge, but not dripping. You don't need to have it soaking in a puddle. Otherwise, this dough will actually kind of fall apart. So you want to have a nice wrap around, a nice trace around your wrapper with water. And now we're just going to add more of our meat. Now, in this case, like I said before, you can actually add other parts to this filling. This might be a good opportunity to use carrots or cucumbers or other vegetables or even noodles. Some people will add noodles to this in addition to the meat filling. But for our purposes, since we have the meat filling, we'll just do this. Now, what we're going to do is take this wrapper, put it over, take one corner, go to the, not quite to the opposite, kind of tamp down the dough to make a little bit of a seal, pull it back ever so slightly. Okay, so you still got the ends. Then you're going to do a bit of a half turn to kind of get the meat in there. And then you're going to take one corner, fold it over onto the dough, okay, and do a seal. Then the opposite side, again, you're going to make sure that the filling is in and let it touch the other dough and seal it. Let it come together and kind of squish. And then fold over, pull a little bit back so it feels nice and full, and then roll it over. Now, this is ready to go be fried. You could fill it fuller, but it may also explode. So beware of that. So be careful on how much you fill these. So now we've had a handy dandy start on our steamed dumplings, or jiaozi, or you could make even, I just thought of this, you could even make pot stickers with this. So pot stickers, steamed dumplings, boiled dumplings, a soup dumpling, all sorts of cool things with that one item. And you can now use this to fry as an egg roll. And again, with this egg roll, you could add more to it for a little bit extra body, or not, as you choose. But we still have a fair amount left for other things. So I like to take this opportunity to set up this filling in a couple of different ways. We've already seen how to do it in egg rolls and dumplings, but I'll also just put it in freezer bags to cook up later with rice. So I'll just take my Ziploc bag, and I'll actually take this opportunity to label it while there's nothing in it. And by labeling it, I now know when I made it to then use it by maybe a month, 2 months, even 3 months down the line. If I lose it in my freezer, it's good for up to a year. So that's kind of a good thing too. And all I'll do is put in dumpling filling. And then today's date. Okay, that's all. Now I'll just put in, I'll usually probably fill about half of it full. And that'll serve me, that over rice will give me several servings of meals. And that's kind of a good thing. And the secret to that is the sauce that I put in this, the seasoning and all the mix that I put in, will create a nice kind of broth that over rice seasons the rice beautifully. So that's the added bonus to having those particular seasonings cook out, and then you can just put it over rice and it tastes really nice. So the trick to this too is to make sure that you kind of get the air taken out of the bag. So you fold it over, press out the air as you seal it shut, and then it's all good and kind of vacuum packed. So then you can just take this and put it in your freezer. One thing I will note too, part of the reason why I like pork too is that one of the reasons is that I like having it take in the flavor. But the other thing is you can kind of tell when it's actually fresh. And in this case, it's nice and pink. And so when you have it, when you use it, you want to make sure it kind of comes, it is nice and pink, and almost immediately freeze it or cook it. If you don't, it can go bad and be a little bit funky. So you want to make sure that when you use it that you kind of cook it right away. So the next step is I will be actually making several of these to then cook and or freeze. So now I'm just actually boiling some water and heating up some oil to fry my egg rolls and to boil the steamed dumplings. Now once you boil the water, you can use this as your means of steaming if you have a steamer, a bamboo steamer. That would work here. I'm just going to boil them right now because it's quick and easy. But I'm also going to fry, but I'm just going to use some Crisco. I happen to have Crisco. You can use whatever oil suits you best for what you're going to be doing this project for. As I'm waiting for these to heat up, some things I wanted to point out is realize that for your oil, you want to make sure that's hot enough to start cooking right away. If it's not hot enough, don't put it in there. A little tester might be to take a little bit of water, a little drop of water, and if it starts to fizzle and sizzle, that's good. You can also see that it starts to ripple, that the oil starts to ripple when it's hot enough. So those are two little testers you can do. But also, when you boil your water, you want to make sure that you boil your dumplings for at least a minute. You'll see them actually sink, but then actually float up. And you'll see a change in the dumpling wrapper, and that'll help you out too. On the other hand, for the egg roll, you'll see it actually turn nice and golden. Once you see it's nice and golden, take it out either with a fork or tongs and set it aside. I happen to have some paper towels that I'll just set it on for a while they kind of cool off, because I personally am not real fond of a lot of extra oil. So that's why I set it aside like that. As you see, it's cooking away. I've already flipped it over once. It's cooking nice and good. I've actually also turned down the heat because you don't want it to cook too fast. But then the dumplings will also start to float. They sink, and now you see that one kind of moving up. So it's starting to cook. This is a good sign. Believe it or not, I've actually turned off the oil because I was concerned it got too hot. And I wanted to make sure that the center of the egg roll actually got cooked. But I'll have to take it out here shortly to make sure it doesn't fully burn. As you can see, the dumplings are starting to float, which is a good thing. I'm letting them sit in there just a little bit longer for a total of probably 2 minutes so that it can fully come to a boil, but also heat through the center of the dumpling so that it's nice and cooked all the way through. But I can put a bowl aside so I can put the dumplings in the bowl, because I don't necessarily need to drink or have the water because it's not seasoned broth. But if you wanted to season the water for broth and soup, you can certainly do that and have a proper dumpling soup. So this is what the dumpling looks like. Rather wilted, but rather tasty. And so when we put it inside, it's all done now. We're all ready to taste. So now that I've gotten everything cooked up, it's smelling really good. And I've put on my little bit of special sauce on my jiaozi that I boiled instead of steamed. And I gotta tell you, I'm really excited about this. Every time I make it, it's like things go good. So let's see how this one tastes. That is just about perfect. And the thing is about this is that it actually brings me back to the home where I learned how to make these in Jinan, China. And that's kind of part and parcel why I do this, because I really enjoy going mentally back to where I've been and checking things out. Kind of like that picture behind me is when I went to London. Every time I see this one, it's a picture I took one spare Tuesday night in London when I was out walking around with another member of the party that I was with, kind of just checking things out. Now, let's check out how this egg roll tastes. I'm really kind of excited about this one too. Just a little juicy, but otherwise very tasty. It is a little bit on the darker side because I had the oil a little too hot, but you know what? It hits the spot as well. I think if it had some added carrots or noodles in it, that would have been spot on as well. So I hope seeing these different ways to use this filling. It really kind of helps you see how you can use one item in a couple of different ways. And remember, learning how to use different cultures' foods can help you kind of not only see that culture, but you can use things in different ways and on the cheap that maybe you didn't realize before. Like, for example, this particular batch of food, between the 2.5 pounds of pork that I bought for just over $3, I believe it was $3.64, along with a head of Napa cabbage and two bunches of scallions, cost me about, I'd say it didn't cost me more than about $6 for all 3 items. And I had the rest of the ingredients in my pantry. So those are things that I use all the time. So for about $6, $7 total, I'm able to have this for multiple meals. In fact, this will last me probably a good 10 to 15 meals, which for $6 you kind of can't beat with a stick. And so with that in mind, I hope that you will look into some different cultures' foods to help you kind of see different things than maybe you're used to. And remember, a lot of times that different cultures, they may be different visually, but when push comes to shove, a lot of different cultures are all about what our culture is about. Family, entertainment, getting together and doing things as a group. And that's kind of the fun part of being self-reliant too, is kind of getting together with different people and learning about what they do, whether it's your neighbor and how they do things in their home, or somebody from across town, or even somebody from a different country. And so I hope this helps you kind of see some different things, and I hope that you, if you have not already, that you'll hit the subscribe button down below. And remember, it's always fun to check out new things, especially when you're trying to see how to become more independent yourself. So I hope you have a good one, and thanks for stopping by Gyroscope Farm and the Traveling Homesteader. Take care.